Greg was already halfway through his second glass of Pinot when he launched into another brag about his company's new AI procurement system. I swear, if he said the word valuation one more time, I was going to jam a shrimp fork into my own thigh just for a distraction. My name's Riley Thompson. I'm 34, I live in Spokane, Washington, and I fix bikes for a living. At least that's what my family likes to say when they're trying not to sound embarrassed. Quick note, before we start, how's your day going and where are you joining from? We were at Bay Street Grill, some overpriced seafood place Greg picked for the ambience. White tablecloths, candlelight, waiters in black vests, way too serious for a family dinner. Greg sat at the head of the table like he was hosting a damn board meeting. So, we're about to close another seed round, Greg announced, grinning while waving his wine glass like he was at a TED Talk. One of the VCs is from Dubai. We're projecting a valuation north of 90 million by Q3. Mom gasped like he just announced he was getting knighted. Oh, Gregory, that's incredible. You've always had that spark. I just knew you'd be something special. Dad nodded, chewing on a scallop. Smart money backs smart people. I shifted in my seat, still in my jeans and flannel from work. I hadn't even changed. Figured there wasn't a point. Then Greg turned toward me, wearing that smug older brother smirk that made me want to throw him off a dock when we were kids. How's that bicycle repair hobby going? He asked. Still wrenching on rusty chains and stuff? Mom chuckled politely, like he was just teasing. She's always been so hands-on. But Riley, honey, have you thought about maybe getting back into engineering? You are so good with numbers. I nodded once, kept my mouth shut. Let them talk. Greg leaned in again. I saw this guy on TikTok making custom bikes out of old washing machine parts. You should look into that. Might be your niche? I just smiled and took a sip of my iced tea. He had no clue. None of them did. I glanced at my watch. Less than 2 hours now. I already knew the feature article was scheduled to drop around 9. Prime time. They kept talking. About Greg's office renovations, Greg's new investor brunches, Greg's goddamn espresso machine that connects to Wi-Fi. I let it all wash over me. They were so busy worshiping him. They didn't notice I hadn't said more than 10 words. But I didn't mind. Because tonight, everything was about to shift, and none of them were ready for it. Greg flagged down the waiter like he owned the place and ordered another bottle of wine for the table. He shot me a look like I should be thanking him for the gesture. So, Riley, he said, spinning his fork between his fingers, you still living in that little duplex out by the railroad tracks? I didn't even look up. Yeah, it's quiet, he snorted. Sure, quiet. And what, like 700 square feet? With your job, I figured you'd need more space for, tools and chains. Mom lightly touched my arm like she was about to offer comfort, but it came out more like concern, wrapped in judgment. Honey, you know we just want what's best for you. Have you ever thought about going back to school? Just to maybe give yourself some options? I took a sip of water. I've got options. I'm good. Dad set down his fork, leaned in a little. You walked away from one of the top mechanical firms in Seattle. You had a 6-figure job. People would kill for that. I shrugged. It wasn't for me. But Riley, Mom jumped in again, you worked so hard to get there. 4 years of college, that NASA internship. Remember how proud we were? I remember, I said. My voice stayed flat, but my jaw tightened. Greg cut in with that forced chuckle he does when he's pretending something's lighthearted. You were the smart one, Riles. Seriously, nobody expected me to do anything. But you? You were the golden child. Straight A's, robotics team, all that nerdy genius stuff. Then you just tapped out and started fixing bikes. He gestured with his wine glass like he was still trying to understand the math. You're wasting your brains under a damn bike lift. I could feel the back of my neck heat up, but I kept my tone even. I like what I do. That's the difference. He raised an eyebrow. You like breathing in tire rubber and engine oil all day? I smiled. Better than being stuck in meetings with guys like you. Dad cleared his throat. It's just hard for us to understand, Riley. You used to want to build things that change the world. Now you're still building, I said, cutting him off. There was a beat of silence. Greg tilted his head and narrowed his eyes like he was trying to decide if I was joking or just clueless. I didn't give him the satisfaction. The waiter returned with the wine, poured a splash into Greg's glass, then moved over to me. He filled mine a little more than necessary, then gave me a quick smile. You're Riley Thompson, right? He said under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I nodded. Yeah. He gave a little nod back, like we had some kind of unspoken understanding, then moved to pour for Mom. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was grinning. Greg picked up the thread again. Just saying, maybe it's time to think bigger. You're not in your 20s anymore. What's the end game? Patch up enough chains to retire at 50? Mom chimed in, like this was the moment she'd been waiting for. We're not criticizing you, sweetie. We're just worried. You've always had so much potential. I folded my napkin, nice and slow. And you think I'm not living up to it? Nobody answered right away. Dad finally said, we just thought you'd go further. I leaned back in my chair. Further than what? Greg jumped in, grinning. Further than Spokane, that's for sure. I ignored him. I'm happy with where I am. You don't sound happy, Mom said gently. You sound defensive. That one almost got me. I stared at her for a second, feeling that familiar sting creep in. They always wrapped their disapproval in this fake softness, like I was too fragile to hear the truth unless it was dipped in syrup. I picked up my wine, took a long sip, and let the silence stretch just enough to make them uncomfortable. Then I looked right at Greg. You done? He smirked. Just looking out for my little sister. The waiter came back with the appetizer plates cleared and glanced my way again. That look in his eyes, he knew. He recognized me. Not from school or some LinkedIn profile, number. He knew what was coming, and I was more than ready to let it hit. The waiter came back holding a leather dessert menu in each hand. He passed them out around the table with that same polite smile, but his eyes landed on me again like something just clicked. He hesitated, then leaned in slightly. Sorry, this might sound weird, but are you Riley Thompson? Like, the Riley Thompson from the e-mobility interviews? The whole table froze. I blinked once. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice calm. That's me. Greg lowered his menu a couple inches. Mom tilted her head. Dad squinted like the waiter had spoken in another language. The guy lit up. No way. My cousin runs deliveries for Spokane Courier. He's always talking about your kits. Says they save him a ton on fuel and repairs. Swapped his whole fleet to electric last year because of your setup, I nodded. That's great to hear, he grinned. Seriously, that's badass. I saw your name in Fast Company last month. Something about game changer in small-scale urban transport. You've got a whole team, right? And the DIY retrofit videos, that's all you? I could feel the heat coming off Greg across the table. Yeah, I said, casually flipping my menu open. That's part of it. The waiter looked impressed, then glanced at the others like they should be too. You've made a real impact. Just wanted to say that. My cousin swears by your work. Thanks, I said, nodding. He smiled once more, then backed away toward the kitchen. Greg stared at me like he'd just seen a raccoon solve a Rubik's Cube. Mom blinked slowly. Wait, that's about you? I didn't look up from the dessert list. Yeah, it's been going well lately. Greg narrowed his eyes. E-mobility? Like scooters and stuff? Electric kits, cargo conversions, last-mile solutions. Mostly bikes and three-wheelers, I said, still scanning the menu like we were just making small talk. Dad leaned forward. And people buy these? Pretty often, yeah? Greg finally spoke again. Since when? I gave a small shrug. A few years. Mom looked like she was trying to do math in her head. Is this that little side gig you mentioned last year? The one in the garage? I smiled. We've grown a bit since then. Greg laughed once, short and confused. Hold on, Fast Company? As in, the real one? Yep. I could see him reach for his phone under the table, trying to be subtle, but he was already typing something into the search bar. His face was all concentration, like he couldn't possibly believe he'd missed something that big. You never said anything, Mom said. You never asked, I replied. Dad sat back in his chair, arms crossed. So, what exactly are you running here? A business, I said plainly. The table went quiet again. Dessert menus sat untouched. Greg looked up like he was starting to see the full outline of a picture he didn't know existed. And this has customers? Employees? Warehouses, too, I said, not offering more than that. He leaned forward. Like how many people work for you? I just sipped my drink and raised my eyebrows. Enough. Nobody touched their wine. Nobody looked at each other. The silence wasn't heavy, it was loaded. I finally glanced up. Told you, I like what I do. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it again. His fingers still hovered near his phone. And just like that, the energy in the room shifted. The steakhouse lights hadn't changed, but I swear it felt brighter on my side of the table. They didn't know it yet, but we'd already left the old story behind. Greg was still holding his phone under the table, but now he pulled it up where everyone could see. His eyes narrowed as he typed. Thompson, E-Rides, he muttered. Okay, let's see what the hell this is. I didn't say a word. I just picked up a spoon and stirred the melting ice in my glass. Greg tapped a link. His face twitched. He scrolled. Then again, his brow pulled tight like he just walked into a room full of mirrors and didn't like what he saw. Wait, he said. This says... He turned the screen toward Dad. This article says they're one of the top 3 electric mobility suppliers in the Northwest. Mom leaned in beside him, eyes scanning. Is that your website? Yeah, I said calmly. That's ours. Greg's voice pitched higher. You have over 90 employees? 123 last time I checked. He blinked. You've got a full production facility? I nodded. 2, one in Pasco, one in Austin. Dad straightened in his chair. Jesus. Mom's hand flew to her chest. Wait a minute. Is this that side gig you told us about last year? I didn't even look up from my drink. We've grown a bit since then. Greg kept scrolling. This can't be real. His fingers stopped mid-scroll. His mouth fell open just slightly, like the sentence he read didn't make sense to his brain. This article says your company valuation is over 700 million? I didn't flinch. That one's a couple months old. Greg's fork slipped from his hand and clattered against the plate. Mom gasped. Dad swore under his breath. I glanced across the table. Still think I should go back to school? Greg ignored the jab. He was deep in a rabbit hole now. You're on the cover of Clean Tech Weekly? That's a thing? It is, I said. He clicked something else. What the hell? You gave a keynote at the Mobility Futures Conference in Chicago. Last fall. He looked up at me. You flew to Chicago and didn't say anything? You fly to Miami every time your app crashes and expect us to throw a parade. Dad turned to me, face a little pale. So, you really built all this? From scratch? From scrap, technically, I said. Started in my garage, converted an old food delivery bike, proved the numbers, partnered with a fleet, scaled Mom, looked like she was trying to keep up but failing. Why didn't you tell us any of this? Because every time I did, someone changed the subject to Greg's espresso machine. Greg leaned back and stared at me, like he'd never actually seen me until right now. I thought you were just tinkering with stuff, he said. You never acted like this was real. It was always real, I said. You just couldn't see it unless it looked like your version of success. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. The background noise of the restaurant felt louder, like the clinking silverware and murmurs were closing in on our table. Greg finally set his phone down. He wasn't smiling anymore. Mom glanced at him, then back at me. How long has this been going on? Long enough. Dad cleared his throat. And that place you're living in? Temporary, I said. I like to stay mobile. Most weeks, I'm not even home. Greg looked down at his empty plate. 700 million. He wasn't grinning now. He wasn't even blinking. I folded my napkin and dropped it on the table. Dessert's on me, I said. Might as well celebrate something. Greg's phone buzzed. He flinched like it shocked him. Glanced down, then froze. What the hell? Mom's phone went off next. Then Dad's, like a coordinated hit. Greg tapped his screen, eyes darting. Oh my God. Mom picked up hers and squinted. Is this you? Dad's phone was already open. He just stared at it like it was a foreign language. Jesus, Riley. Greg read out loud, slow at first, how Riley Thompson quietly built America's leading e-mobility manufacturer. He looked up at me like the words didn't compute. It dropped early, I said, casual. Greg scrolled. His thumb stopped on one of the photos. Is this your plant? I nodded. Pasco facility. It's our biggest one. The photo was me in my coveralls, standing in front of the fabrication hangar with a welding helmet tucked under one arm. Stacks of motor kits, battery packs lined like soldiers. Our logo on a bright orange cargo bike in the corner. Mom turned her phone so Dad could see. It says you design everything yourself? Started out that way, I said. Now we've got engineers. But I still approve every design. Greg looked up from his screen, pale. You engineered the actual kits? From scratch. Dad rubbed his temple. You didn't just run the business. You built the product? Yeah, I didn't license anything. That's why we scale faster. We own the patents. Mom's mouth opened and closed twice. I thought you were just helping with logistics. You thought wrong. Greg snorted under his breath, still scrolling. You've got contracts in 9 states? 14, I corrected. And counting. He scrolled again. There's a video of you giving a tour. Is that another plant? Austin. We build the commercial scooter fleets there. Mom finally set her phone down and stared at me. And you never told us? I tried. Every time it turned into Greg's quarterly update or someone asking if I had a boyfriend yet. Greg glanced at Dad like he was hoping someone else would say something. No one did. I leaned forward. You really want to know what I've been doing? They looked at me like they weren't sure they could handle the answer. I just locked in a citywide contract with Portland, I said. $850 million over 5 years. We're replacing their entire last-mile fleet. Scooters, cargo bikes, everything. School campuses, municipal workers, delivery routes. Greg blinked like he'd been hit in the face. I met with the mayor last month. The city council signed it 2 weeks ago. We're staffing up to cover it. 850, Dad said slowly, voice hollow. Million. Annually, I added. It's a full-scale integration. We're already prototyping in Chicago for the same model. Mom's hand covered her mouth. Greg finally spoke. You're bigger than my company. I tilted my head. I've been bigger than your company. He didn't argue. Dad leaned in. And the duplex? Temporary. I travel most weeks. It's cheaper to keep something simple near the warehouse. Mom swallowed hard. You live like that. By choice? I don't need a house with 6 bathrooms. I need time zones and supplier meetings. Greg looked down at his phone again. This article says you turned down funding from BlackRock and Sequoia? Yeah, I don't need VC money. I like control. He shook his head slowly. That's insane. No, I said. What's insane is how long it took you to realize I'm not a joke. The table went quiet again. I let the silence stretch. Then Greg muttered, I always thought you'd come crawling back to the corporate world. You never thought I left it on purpose? He flinched. That one landed. Mom placed her hand flat on the table. Riley, we didn't know. You didn't ask, I shot back. You assumed. Nobody denied it. Greg set his phone down like it physically burned him. You were sitting across from me this whole time, and I had no idea. I leaned back. That was the point. Greg leaned back in his chair like he was trying to reclaim some kind of upper hand, but his phone kept lighting up beside his plate. He glanced at it again. Probably texts from his VC buddies. He swiped quick, cleared the notifications, then gave this weak smile. It's cool, honestly. I mean, good for you, Riles. I didn't reply. He tapped his screen again. People are sending me the article, like 5 guys already. One of them thought it was a prank. It's not. Mom looked at me with this strange mix of confusion and pride. When did this happen, Riley? When did you get so serious about it? I dropped my napkin on the table. I didn't get serious. I've been serious since day 1. You just stopped seeing it. Her face dropped a little. That's not fair. No. You all treated it like a hobby, like I was wasting time until I got my head back on straight. For 5 years, you smiled and nodded and made cracks about grease and tools, but none of you actually listened. Dad spoke up, tone low. We just thought you were burned out. You left a top job, moved back home. It looked like you were drifting. Because it didn't look like Greg's life? I snapped. Because I didn't post fake hustle quotes on LinkedIn or buy a $2,000 espresso machine. Greg held up a hand. Okay, that was a gift from my investors. You posted about it twice. He shut up. I looked at Dad. You think I left that firm because I was lost? I left because I was bored. I had ideas and no room to move. So I built my own space. Mom's voice dropped. You could have told us. I did. You just couldn't hear it because it didn't sound like what you expected. You didn't want to know about bike frames or torque conversion or battery testing. You wanted to hear I got promoted or bought a house. Silence. Greg looked down at the table, mouth tight. His phone buzzed again, and he didn't even reach for it this time. You never once asked what made me happy, I said. You just assumed I was failing because I wasn't chasing the same crap he was. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but all he said was, "We got it wrong." I nodded. "Yeah, you did." Mom put her hands in her lap, her voice small. "We didn't mean to hurt you, but you did. Every time you looked past me at these dinners, every time you brushed off what I do with that, well, as long as you're happy tone, every joke about chains and tools like I'm some dropout tinkering in a shed." Greg finally spoke, eyes still on his phone. "I didn't think it was real, what you were doing. I thought you were just messing around." "I know." He looked up. "I didn't mean to be a dick." "You were." Another pause. No one defended him. Mom stared at me for a long moment. "You're not just successful, you're brilliant." "I always was. You just stopped looking for it." Dad rubbed the back of his neck, voice rough. "Guess we needed a waiter and a headline to open our eyes." "Yeah," I said, standing up. "Guess you did." Nobody said anything. They just sat there, Greg staring at his phone like it might rescue him, Mom picking at the seam of her napkin, Dad's jaw set tight like he was chewing words he couldn't spit out. I stood there a second longer, then asked, "So what now?" They all looked up at me. "Are you going to keep pretending I'm lost, or are you finally going to see me for who I am?" Greg shifted in his seat. "Riles, come on. It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," I said. "You all made up this version of me that was easier to dismiss, because the real version didn't fit your picture." Mom opened her mouth, fumbled a second, then said, "Sweetie, we're proud of you. You're proud now," I cut in. "Now that there's an article, an evaluation, and a contract with a city you've actually heard of." She flinched. Dad tried to jump in. "We didn't mean to judge you. We just didn't understand." "No, you didn't want to," I said. "You kept it simple. Greg's the success, Riley's the one figuring things out." Mom's voice softened, like she thought tone could fix history. "We didn't mean to put you in a box." "But you did," I said. "And you kept me there for years." Greg finally spoke, still stumbling. "But how did you even do all this without saying anything? How'd you hide it?" "I didn't hide it," I said. "I talked about it every time you asked how I was. You just tuned out the second it didn't sound like a job you'd brag about on Facebook." He blinked. "I didn't mean to." I held up a hand. "Stop. This isn't about what you meant. It's about what you did. All of you." They went quiet again. No excuses this time. Just guilt, sitting heavy across the table. I glanced at my phone. It was time. "Well," I said, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair, "I've got a Zoom call with a partner in Taiwan." Mom looked up, alarmed. "You're leaving?" "Yeah. I've got a contract review in 10 minutes. Time zones don't wait." Greg opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I slung the jacket over my shoulder. "If you want to catch up, next time ask me something real. Don't assume I'm just patching tires and killing time." Dad nodded once, eyes down. "Understood." I turned toward the exit. Not one of them moved. The valet opened the door to the black Tesla Model X waiting out front. Not my old pickup. Not tonight. I stepped in, shut the door, and let the quiet hum of the electric engine wrap around me. The screen lit up with a message from Madison, my assistant. "Tokyo team confirmed license deal. Finalized docs arriving in AM. Congrats, boss." I smiled, leaned back, let it sit. Then my phone lit up again. "Greg." I stared at his name for a second before answering. "Yeah?" His voice was lower, slower. "Hey, look, I know this is probably the last thing you want, but I read the full article." I waited. "And your interviews, all of them. The one with Mobility Monthly hit me hardest. The way you talked about scaling impact without compromising ownership, honestly, that's genius. You called me a dropout 2 hours ago." "I know," he said, "and I was a jackass." I didn't argue. Greg let out a breath. "I didn't get it. I thought you'd given up on everything. I didn't see it for what it was." "You weren't looking." "I was comparing," he said, "and I shouldn't have been." The car made a soft turn onto the boulevard. I watched the lights blur past the tinted glass. He kept going. "I was wrong. About you. About what success is supposed to look like. You proved there's more than one way to win." I let that hang in the air for a beat. "You actually mean that?" "Yeah, I do," he said. "And I'm sorry for the crap I said. All of it." I didn't say anything right away. Then, "I'm not trying to outdo you, Greg. I never was." "I know," he said. I think I just didn't like the idea that you were building something better without needing any of the things I thought mattered. You spent years talking down to me like I was stuck. He was quiet a second, then said, I wasn't ready to see you as an equal. I raised an eyebrow. And now? Now? He laughed lightly. Now I'm wondering if I should be taking notes. The Tesla pulled up to the light. I saw my reflection in the window. Steady, finally. I'm open to talking more, I said, but on level ground. Deal, he said. You've got my respect, Riley. I mean it. Then stop calling it a hobby. He chuckled. Fair. The light changed. The car moved. We sat in the silence for another second before he said, maybe next time you let me buy the drinks and you tell me about Taiwan. We'll see, I said. Then I hung up. 2 weeks later, I pulled up outside my parents' house in Pasco in the same Model X. Mom was already waiting on the porch with her purse clutched tight, like she was nervous and didn't want to show it. She got in without a word, and we drove in silence most of the way, until the factory gates came into view. Her breath caught when we turned the corner. This is it! This is it, I said, punching in the gate code. Inside, the main fabrication plant was humming, forklifts gliding between shipping zones, robotic welders sparking against custom frames, and my team spread across the floor like they owned it. Because they did, in every way that mattered. Mom stepped out of the car slowly, looking up at the massive Thompson E-Rides logo painted across the loading dock wall. I thought it'd be smaller, I smirked. Everyone does. I walked her through the glass doors and straight into the main hallway. Sasha, my COO, met us at the entrance. This is my mom, I said. Deborah Thompson. Sasha smiled and shook her hand. Nice to finally meet you. Riley talks about you. Mom raised an eyebrow. Hopefully not all bad. Sasha laughed. She's too busy running things to gossip. We moved through the factory floor, battery assembly on one side, kit packaging on the other. Engineers waved as we passed. One of them jogged over to show us a redesigned cargo rig bracket we'd just prototyped. Mom listened, wide-eyed, nodding slowly as the jargon washed over her. You built this, she said finally, after we finished the loop and stepped into the overlook platform above the production line. All of it. You built all of this. From a garage and a bad idea, I said. She turned to me, eyes glassy but proud. I'm not impressed by the money, Riley. I swallowed hard. I didn't ask you to be. I'm proud of what it means, she said. You saw a problem. You fought through it. You didn't wait for permission. My throat tightened. I blinked fast. That's all I ever wanted, I said quietly. She reached out and squeezed my hand. We stood there a moment longer, watching bikes roll off the line like clockwork. As we headed out to the car, Mom looked over her shoulder at the warehouse one more time. Have you ever thought about going global? She asked. I opened the door, smiled, and nodded toward the windshield. We already are.